My mum always told me not to go into the attic. She said there were spiders up there that would crawl up your nose hairs and lay eggs in your brain. I am sure she was just trying to keep me out of the attic, because it was dusty and full of cobwebs. But the way she told the story made it sound like a horror movie. I grew up and moved out, but whenever I visited, I never went into the attic. That is, until today. It had been years since I'd seen my mum, and we were settling her estate after she passed away. My brother and I were going through the house to decide what to do with her things when I got an idea. "Hey, Rob," I called out to my brother. "Do you remember that puppet Mum used to take out in the garden to scare us? The one that looks like an old man with a hooked nose and creepy eyes?" "Yeah, that one. Where is it now?" "Probably in the attic," he replied. An evil grin spread across my face. I ran up the stairs to the attic, which was filled with boxes, furniture, lamps, and other junk. I remembered my mom keeping the puppet in a large wooden chest, and that's where I started looking. After about 10 minutes of searching, I found it. I lifted the lid and reached inside to pull out the puppet. But when I did, the puppet didn't come out alone. Something else emerged from the box. It was a long, thin piece of string, and if my memory served me correctly, that puppet wasn't supposed to have a string attached to it. I must have gotten spooked by whatever horror movie my mum and dad were watching the last time I stayed over, because I bolted out of the attic, back down the stairs and out the front door. I decided to get some fresh air and walk around the block. As I turned onto Maple Street, I noticed a peculiar thing. All of the houses on this street were identical. Except for one, the house that my mum and dad had lived in looked totally different from all the others. It was then that I realized that the memories associated with the house weren't mine. They were my mum's. I know that sounds weird, but it makes sense. I had spent most of my life living in the house with my mum, so all the memories associated with it are really hers. And I suppose that explains why I never forgot the puppet or the string attached to it. It was a part of her life, and somehow she managed to pass that part of her life on to me. I walked past the house, turned around, and headed back the way I came. I felt something brush against my leg, and I instinctively jumped. It was just a leaf, but it reminded me of how jumpy I'd been when I found the puppet. Maybe I should go back, I thought. After all, it was just a puppet. But then I heard a voice. "Don't go back," it said. "Whatever you do, don't go back." I spun around, but there was no one there. I started to walk away, then I hesitated. Was that my mom? Could she have somehow possessed the puppet? And was she warning me not to go back? I started walking faster, then broke into a run. I didn't dare look back. I did want to see if my mom was standing behind me with the puppet in her hand, waiting for me to turn around so she could yell, "Got you!" I ran all the way home, burst through the front door and collapsed on the couch. That was the scariest thing that had ever happened to me. Or was it? As I sat there catching my breath, I started to calm down. Then I heard a noise from the other room. It sounded like footsteps. Footsteps in the next room. I slowly stood up and crept toward the door. I strained to listen, but the footsteps had stopped. Maybe it was just my imagination, I thought. But then I heard the footsteps again. They were definitely coming from the other room. I took a deep breath, then threw open the door and stepped inside. There was no one there. I looked around the room to make sure I was alone, then walked back to the couch. I told myself that everything was fine. There was no one in the house, let alone the next room. But then I heard a noise from above. It sounded like footsteps on the ceiling. I stood up and walked to the bedroom. I knelt down next to the bed and listened. The footsteps were coming from the attic. And just then, the attic door opened. The string attached to the puppet lay on the floor. I don't want to be too dramatic, but at that moment, my life flashed before my eyes. I knew that if I stayed in that house, whatever possessed the puppet would eventually possess me. So I grabbed the puppet and ran. I ran down the stairs, out the front door, and down the street. Behind me, I heard the footsteps pounding on the ceiling, growing louder and more frantic. As I ran, I could feel the presence behind me getting closer and closer. I didn't dare look back, but I could feel its hot, fetid breath on my neck. Finally, I reached my car and dove inside. I slammed the door and locked it, then sped away from the house. In the rearview mirror, I saw the puppet standing on the lawn. It waved at me with one hand, while the other remained stuck in the air like it was attached to a string.